Welcome to Champagne Problems Podcast. I am your host, Robbie Shaw. Join us as we explore mental and emotional well-being, physical optimization, and the journey to discovering your highest self. Champagne Problems is brought to you in proud partnership with Bond Buzz, the alcohol-free social spirit. Hunter Lewis, welcome to Champagne Problems.
Robbie, thanks for having me on.
Of course.
First annual Food and Wine Classic in Charleston. Psych, you guys are here.
How about that? Thank you for having me. There's been a few times I've had to answer, why are you here? Who are you? What do you do? And, it's hard for me not to say, well, Hunter invited me down.
Well, man, I think that it's important for you guys to be here. It's important to capture the stories that are happening here and all the different narratives that are happening. I mean, we talked about this morning after the 5K. Thanks for setting that up, by the way.
Hey, no problem.
It's a good run by the water. But, what's happening in the hospitality space, even for a brand that has the name wine in the brand name, we're Food and Wine. Mm-hmm. But it's important to be having these conversations because this is what's happening in the culinary space and with chefs, with somms, with folks in the front and the back of the house.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you know, my podcast is around this topic, obviously in other areas as well, but I have tended to focus in the food and beverage industry because it's so prevalent. I have a lot of friends in that industry, and you do hear a lot of stories of obviously the hard living, but then, the other side of it. And I know, credit to Steve Palmer and many others who are championing the same mission. That culture is shifting, and you guys are right there with it.
Yeah, it's a shift, and I talk about it as a series of conversations. We weren't having conversations about mental health as a country a decade ago.
Right.
It was taboo. It was something that you kept within a family. You kept hidden from other people. You wanted to appear as strong and outwardly put together as possible. And the kitchen culture, and especially among chefs, it's all about that. It was led with toxic masculinity. I came up through that. When I shifted from journalism into restaurants, you had to tough it out. And this was the early days of Anthony Bourdain and Kitchen Confidential, and you got by on your toughness. And so you couldn't show any cracks. And, beyond the verbal abuse, beyond the abuse of alcohol and the ready availability of anything at your disposal in a restaurant kitchen, that sort of toughness and machismo really got us nowhere in terms of a culture. And so what we've seen over the past 5 years especially is breaking through that taboo to talk about mental health as in the same way you talk about tuning a car engine. Mm-hmm. We talk to chefs and we talk to our editors now. You don't have a therapist. It's like you don't have somebody that you're gonna get your oil changed once a week or talk to somebody. It's like normalizing the conversation around mental health. It's personal to me when it comes to my family, mm-hmm. And it's personal and professionally important to me as a priority at Food and Wine that we are there and that we're having these conversations.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that y'all are doing that. Y'all are such a pinnacle in the industry that it's up to people like you and others that are going to actually create the shift. It is a culture shift. It's fascinating to think about that machismo and that toxic masculinity and that tough it out and that grind and I mean that does apply to other industries and maybe more historically than now, but I wonder why it was so prevalent in that world.
Right. Well, a lot of people blame the brigade system, the French brigade system set up long ago under folks who codified it like Escoffier. And there was one way to run a kitchen, and it had to be orderly, and things had to happen on time. And in order for that to happen, everybody had to understand their job. And so you had a ranking system and a hierarchy. But really what it was also about was putting people in their place and making sure that the folks lower on the ladder understood who was in charge. Mm-hmm. And so, that kind of grew over time and it was modified and adapted. but especially in the American cooking vernacular and the way that people ran businesses through the 80s, through the 90s, through the early aughts, up until recently, it was acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
It's no longer acceptable.
Right.
And we've seen a sea change, and the way we look at it for Food and Wine Best New Chefs is a big, big accolade that we give out every year. We've been doing it since 1988. We've got the first class of Best New Chefs in 1988 were Thomas Keller, Rick Bayless, Daniel Boulud. These are folks who are icons in the industry. You fast forward a couple years, you've got folks like Nobu and Nancy Silverton, David Chang, Kwame Onwuachi. And these are chefs who have really shaped the way we eat and drink in America. Well, a few years ago, we started, let's say about 6 years ago, we started to think about this accolade and think about the people we were putting on the pedestal and sharing a platform with, and making sure that they share the core values of food and wine. And you're never perfect at this. You can't bat 1,000 on this, but we not only do we do background checks and make sure that these folks have not hurt other people, but we do a team culture survey in Spanish and in English. And it's a long way of getting to this point about the survey, is that we want to know how these staffers, and they'll tell us anonymously, how they're being treated in the kitchen. And so how are these people leading with their core values? How are these people leading in the kitchen? It's a pressure-packed place. You've got to, your deadlines are immediate. My deadlines at the magazine are 9 months out. There's always a deadline. Deadline in the kitchen is we need this thing, we need this fish in minutes. And you got to do that over and over and over again. But you can do that leading in a different way, and you have to do that leading in a different way now. Otherwise, you're not going to be relevant as a leader for much longer. And people are not going to want to come work for you. Right.
So, and I've asked this question to a couple people I've spoken to over the last day and a half, specifically Steve Palmer, and it's just a personal curiosity, really. And I do get that, create a more welcoming, more healthy culture. It's going to produce better quality, right? I mean, that's obviously the idea. And I love to kind of talk about that, because I think, walking into a restaurant and not seeing your server sweating bullets with red eyes,
right,
creates a better experience.
Right. I thought a lot about it. Like, I was able to navigate restaurant kitchens when I was younger because I think it came from coming from divorced parents and like being able to operate in chaos a little bit, and just it's kind of the only thing
Some people are drawn to it, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of people in the industry that are drawn to that. They're vulnerable, they're wounded, or they find a home and a community within that because they're surrounded by other folks. But it doesn't have to be that way. And if you're going to be in the game and sustain for the long term, you need to be in a healthy environment. And so when you become a leader, what culture are you leading? And so we have a culture at Food and Wine, and we're not perfect. It's something we have to cultivate every day and improve upon. But we have a culture called the good egg culture. And it really is, it stems from what I learned in restaurant kitchens and what I didn't want to do. It stems from being an athlete like you and having great coaches and bad coaches, and that team culture was happening. And it came from being at magazines with toxic cultures. And I'm not going to name which ones, but we built this culture as the antithesis of those. And to say, look, we can be creative, we can be productive, we can earn a company a lot of money if we treat one another with respect. And the good egg culture, every Tuesday morning at our staff meeting, we share good eggs with the folks who have pushed our culture forward, who have done something that is exceptional or something that adheres to our core values. And so it's a weekly reminder on Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern that, like, hey, we see you, and we see what you're doing, we see what you're doing for our team. And maybe it feels cheesy to new folks on the team, but within a couple weeks they get it, and they're giving good eggs to the people that have supported them. And so we're trying to remind folks on a daily, weekly basis, hey, we see you, and you're showing up for this culture. And if our culture is strong, then what we're putting out into the world as a magazine, as a website, Instagram, events like this, and partnering with the right kinds of people here, that our culture is strong and that the business will be healthy.
Yeah. Love it, dude. Love it. So that's a perfect little segue into maybe the last couple of questions, because, I take it a step further, and as your customers or your clientele come into a restaurant and have that experience, and then specifically, going over into the alcohol-free, non-alcoholic world, restaurants are now offering these. I mean, this is a common discussion these days, but not every restaurant is doing it, so it's still somewhat few and far between. It is trending in the right direction, and now you're getting, alcohol-free pairings and that kind of stuff, which is super cool for me. But, you think about the experience and having that as an offering, and then I'm like, well, how is that affecting people who are coming and having that experience and then going out into the world? You're shifting a culture inside of the industry, but you're also shifting a culture outside of the industry.
Yeah, look, I want our readers to be the best dinner party host and the best dinner party guest in any room they walk into. I want them to be the best restaurant customer. If we're doing our jobs right, we're informing them, we're inspiring them to be that person. And so when you come to our events, we hope that you feel that the space is inclusive, and that wherever you are, you show up and you feel like you're taken care of. Now, one critique I have that I'm going to take back to our team, and I'm going to say we need better NA options at our events. We need an NA program. We're going to change that. We'll have one next year, because you can't show up and be on all day long and not have more balance. So that's kind of meta and insular to me right now. This is what's in my head and what I'm going to share with the team. I would love a cold NA Pilsner. While I'm walking in these tents, I can't drink wine all day. There's no way. But to your point about restaurants, if you are a modern day restaurant and you consider yourself progressive and cutting edge, or you consider yourself a neighborhood joint serving your neighborhood, and you do not have an NA program, you're not creating an inclusive and welcoming space to your customers.
Sure.
Hands down, period. And the restaurants that are doing that are innovating, and the ones that really get it are the ones that maybe even paying more attention to that than they are the classic cocktails. It's kind of like when you're a restaurant doing your menu and the chef's putting together and they're like, okay, we need a vegetable plate. Well, that vegetable plate should have like the most innovative thing happening, because otherwise it's just a vegetable plate. It's the same with NA,
right?
And our former restaurant editor, Robbie Shaw, has pushed this hard. There's no reason in this day and age, with access to ingredients and technique and knowledge and sharing and social media in the way to pass these ideas around, that you're a modern restaurant without a program like that.
Well, and just the population of people that are drinking less and less is only increasing and increasing. So, I mean, the business is there. The opportunity is there for sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what can we expect next? So we got potentially another year here, right? I mean, it's going well enough to where we're going to do it again.
We're coming back. We love Charleston. We love the people here. We'll take feedback from the local hospitality community about how we can show up for them even better next year. We'll talk to the visiting chefs and get their feedback too. We'll talk to our customers and all the ticket holders and see what they want. But we're in it to win it. We love this place. And, it's great to be back here in the Southeast, 5 hours from where I grew up in Chapel Hill. So you're here. I've got college buddies here like you. We've got friends and family coming from all over North Carolina. So that's a cool thing about this event. It's not just my job to be a host of this event. It's personal too, because we got people we care about deeply here in Charleston, who are friends and family, and people coming from all over the Southeast too. So see you here next year.
You got it.
All right, buddy.
You got it. Hunter Lewis. You're a
Thank
good
you, man. Love you.
I love what you're doing, brother.